All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown, and this episode is scheduled to post 12 hours before the solar eclipse of 2024. So if you're hearing this, it means that the world has not ended yet. And if in fact the world has ended, and this is the last thing I ever post, it feels remarkably appropriate that my guest today is my dad, Hi Brown. Now, if the world hasn't ended and this is the first time you're ever listening to this show, it might not be the right episode to listen to first. Regular listeners know there's really two aspects to what I do here. One of them is my own personal story and thoughts and reflections that I offer in the intros and the outros. But the thrust of what I do here is have conversations with other people who are really into yoga. It's all about continuing yoga education and oral history. And I think most of the people who listen are folks who have a passion for yoga and enjoy communing with others of like interest. However, every once in a while, I depart from that usual protocol and I offer something that is wholly personal for me. I've done a few episodes with my daughters, and I've done a couple of solo episodes where it's just me rambling on a bit. And today, I'm offering you this talk with my dad. And I certainly did not plan for this. It's not something I would have conceived of doing necessarily, but I was talking to my dad a few weeks ago, and we don't talk very often. We do keep in touch, but my dad lives very far away. And the last time I saw him was in January of 2019. And out of nowhere, he made this offhanded comment about feeling like he wanted to find a way to reflect on his life and have it recorded or written down. And frankly, I've just never heard my dad express that kind of want. He's never said anything like that to me before. And in the moment when he did, it occurred to me that for the last 8 years, I have had a practice on this show of getting on a phone call with someone and recording it and seeing if I could connect with them and learn about them and find meaning and purpose in the stories that people tell. And I suggested to my dad that this is something I've been doing and I think I'm kind of good at it. And do you want to record a talk with me? And he was game. And so I went about doing this exactly as I would any of the other podcasts that I've done. In fact, I don't think I could really have done this. I've been thinking about whether or not I should even publish this. When we recorded it, I really wasn't sure if it's something that would make sense to be an episode for the show. I really just did it for me and for him. But after we did it, and I've been thinking about it, there's really two reasons why I've decided to share it. One is it's just like a very cathartic, healing thing for me that is totally connected to this show, because honestly, I just don't think I could have had this conversation with my dad if it wasn't for this show. If I hadn't been doing this for the last 8 years and developed this kind of ritual for myself, and it really shows me something. It's like a testament for me about how much doing this show has helped me grow as a person. Because honestly, in the past, I had a lot of resentment towards my dad. And, I imagine many people listening have relationships with your dad. And how well do you really get to know your dad? Especially if your dad is of a generation where our fathers weren't exactly like emotionally open or sharing in transparent ways. So there's just like a lot about my dad I don't know. And just there's so many things you'll hear that about my dad that were challenging to reconcile. And doing this, recording this conversation with him, for me was really a way to connect with him as a person, to see if I could find the same love and humanity that I'm always looking for in these conversations with my dad. And the other side of it is that my dad's story is kind of incredible. And there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I didn't know until we did this. I think that if I step back from the personal side of it and I just look at his story, in my mind, it's really an example of like what was the American dream and what's become of it. You know, you'll hear my dad, he achieved the wife and the 3 kids and the big house and the 2 cars in the driveway. That's what I was born into. But as time has gone on, that idea of an American dream sort of disappeared, or I don't know if it ever existed. But in any case, my dad's story is kind of incredible. And on that level alone, I think it's a illustrative example of things that have happened in our culture and maybe reflects upon where we are now and maybe your relationship to your dad. I don't know. In any case, if it's not your cup of tea, come back next week. Lizzie and Judith Lassiter are going to be here, and who doesn't love them? So we'll be returning to our usual, more directly yoga-related fare next week. But for any of you longtime listeners who have been following along with me over the years and heard me mention my dad from time to time, I think that you will appreciate this as much as I did. It feels really special and important to me, and I'm glad to be sharing it with you today. Real quick before we get to that, let me mention that I have an upcoming live event in Austin, Texas, May 4th and 5th. So if the world has continued and anybody listening to this can get to Austin, Texas, May 4th and 5th, come hang out with me. Let's do some practice. Let's talk about some things that are important to us. I think it would be great to see you there. If you can't make it to Austin, there are lots of other ways that we could connect online. I've got ongoing live classes and a weekly discussion group. I've got a new on-demand video course. You can find all of my stuff, the live events, the online stuff. Everything can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. I think that's good. I'm going to be honest. This is a very vulnerable moment for me, but this is what we're doing. I will touch base with you on the other side. But for now, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with my father, Hi Brown. Hi, Papa. Hi, Nancy.
Okay.
Hi.
How are you, kid?
I'm okay, Papa. How are you?
Hey, you let your hair stay long. That's good.
I'm still letting it be long. I think I'm going to keep it like this. Everybody seems to like it, and
Okay.
So it's funny. Like I mentioned to you, I do this all the time. What we're doing right now. And on the podcast, the exercise is essentially to see if I can learn about somebody and give them an opportunity to tell some of their stories. And so,
plenty of those.
What's that?
Got plenty of those stories.
Well, so when you brought it up the other day when we were on the phone doing something like this, it kind of was like, well, what do you mean? I love that we're doing this, and I guess I'm curious what's motivating you to want to do something like this? Is this for you just to kind of like relive and like mark some things down? Or do you imagine this as like something that you want to have written into kind of like a autobiography? Like what motivated you to think to do something like this with me?
I'm reaching a point that I don't know, things I want to say, things I want to clear up with people. It's sort of, I've considered one of those people who supposedly write your history. I have an interesting part in that I'm really two people. Prior to the heart attack in 47, when I had one set of motivations, and then since the heart attack in 42nd, when I woke up, I was forced to come up with new goals and new things, and it's new to me. So I don't know what I want about it. I just know that I had two different times prior to my heart attack of 47 and who I became after the heart attack.
So that is you just pointed to like what I would call that's the point that you are kind of delineating your heart attack. And you said 42, that's when you were 42 years old? Is that what you mean
47.
When you said 47? So that's what you mean. I'm trying to put the year together, but we can find that later. We don't have to do the math. But you were 47 years old when you had a heart attack. Maybe we can start there and then we'll go back in time and forward in time. But what's that?
Makes no difference to me.
Okay. So I guess why I'm asking specifically is I've had people on here, and one of the things that I've kind of discussed with people, or one of the things that's often a marking point for someone, is a near-death experience. And some people have like a very conscious thing that they went through. You're saying when you woke up, things were different. Was there anything else that happened in that time when you were in your hospital or around your heart attack? That
everybody in the family died at 47, 50 years old. We had some congenital heart defect. No one lived past 50. So I had planned my whole life to do everything that I could before I reached 50. When the heart attack came at 47, I thought that was it. I didn't figure I would survive. When I woke up and everybody was still there, I said, holy shit, I haven't gained a thing. This was like before I had the heart attack. And I realized that I was going to live then, which meant I had to redo my life. I had to redo what was important. And I still haven't decided what's supposedly important. I knew when I thought I was going to die at 50, what I wanted, what my life was like. And since that point in time, I'm lost. I have a part of my life now is Nancy. Obviously, her success. I'm living my life again because I'm living it through Nancy. There are no goals I have left, I think. There's nothing I would change, but it was a seminal moment for me to rethink what was I going to do. I was alive. I knew that I did not want to continue working for Tishman. I didn't like that person. What I've done since then is nothing of I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So I see my life as two parts. Prior to my heart attack at 47, and then finally my move to Israel 13 years later. So there was a time of trying to find myself for 13 years, and I didn't have an option. Nancy found herself. And I had taught for that period of time, but I also didn't want to continue teaching.
Well, what you were teaching is still kind of connected to that former life, right? That what you were teaching was like the stuff that you were doing with Tishman. And Tishman Construction, and that's interesting thing, because at some point, I don't know if we get to it today, because I think we're going to need to do more than one of these sessions.
Okay.
I want to talk about 9/11 with you, but we'll go there another time. I guess what I'm thinking about right now, sitting here with you, I want to go back in time and go back to the former life before the heart attack.
Okay.
And I don't know how far back to go or where to start exactly, except that the other day I was talking with Annabelle, my daughter, your granddaughter,
Yeah.
and she was asking me about your dad. And I basically knew nothing about him.
You probably knew less about my mother also.
I know very little about your parents at all. I have one memory only of us going to New York and you taking me to see your dad. Just one memory of going to visit him. And it was like we stopped in and said hi and then basically left. I don't remember us staying very long. And I don't remember how old I was. But other than that, I have no memories of your dad or your mom. So I have to say, I'm very curious for you to say something about your parents and why they weren't in my life at all as a kid.
Or nor mine.
Nor yours. Yeah.
Okay. I realized when I ended up at Brooklyn Tech, we can go back to ending up at Brooklyn Tech. I didn't realize I was smart. I know I was manipulative and so on and so forth. And I basically had to get out of the area because I had some problems with some gangs. There was a test. And it was leaving my area, which was my little Winthrop Street. And that's where you lived your whole life. Everybody lived their whole life there. They never got out of the neighborhood. That's what it was all about. You became a gangster, you became crooked, or maybe you became a mailman or something like that. But I got an opportunity to leave for 3 days to take a test. And that was a reason to get out of the neighborhood. And that's why I took the test.
So the test was like what, like an aptitude test or like
It was Brooklyn Technical High School, Stuyvesant. There were 4 or 5 in the country at that time where they wanted to find young people who were smart and find something to do with them. So it was a test. I went down, first time I left the neighborhood. I never left the neighborhood. I took the test, I passed the test. And at that point in time, everybody wondered what that was all about. No one had anybody, no one knew anything about it. They knew I passed the test. And my mother, at that point in time, went around telling all the neighbors that I had to be left alone because I was going to study and I was going to be smart. And I kind of liked the fact that I was different than everybody else. But I realized very soon that I couldn't stay where I was. I couldn't stay in the neighborhood. I couldn't become part of it. My parents were not intelligent. And I realized that I had to prepare myself to get the hell out of the neighborhood. So I was at that point, maybe 12 or 13 years old. I ended up going to Brooklyn Tech.
At 13, you went there? So it was like a high school or a middle school?
Yeah, it was a middle school. It was 4 years in middle school. And I got on a bus, I got on the train, and I was the only one in the neighborhood who was out in the neighborhood, which was an interesting side story because I would go to all the parties. I knew all the guys. I was part of the crew. And the women would say, "Who are you? We don't see you in school." So I had it easy. So that's when I took my dancing lessons. I did everything I can to become something that I wasn't. And it was interesting, my relationship with the boys in the neighborhood. At 18, when I went to college, I actually lost track of them. But by that point in time, I had a certain about me that I wasn't afraid of them. First person I met was your mother.
At school, you mean? In college?
College. I met her at school. I said, "That's the woman I want." She was beautiful. She was what I wanted for a wife. And that was it. I went after her and eventually married her. And the day I was in school, But my whole life was to figure out a way to get away. The neighborhood, the guys I was with, while I loved them, it was not what I wanted in my life. I wanted to be smart. I wanted to do important things. So I did my whole plan. I had to do it by the time I was 40, which meant I had to tell your mother she wasn't going to see a lot of me because I was working 80 hours a week. And that was what caused me to go to California 3 days after my wedding without telling anybody I wasn't not coming back because there was too much of if I told them I was coming back, I wasn't gonna come back. It was too easy when I came back because I had relationships with the mob.
Yeah. So wait, stop for a second. So, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say this way because I always knew us as being like the ones who lived on the West Coast and everybody else was on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And you talked about you and mom leaving to get away from the family. But I guess I'm curious because you just brought it up. You said that they were all gangsters. And I guess you mean that literally. And maybe we can be more specific. Like,
yes,
are these well-known gangsters? And what were the rackets you talk about? I have stories in my head of you talking about running numbers for the mob. And I've never really known how.
So here's what happened. At that point in time, no computers. When you were taking bets, someone had to change who was getting the points, who wasn't getting the points. So all that was done in Cuba. So at 14, they put me on a plane. I went to Cuba, and I did nothing but change point spreads for a week.
They flew you to Cuba when you were 14?
Yeah, because I was a genius, and I could change point spreads. I had 3 points. They were there, 2 points there after, and that was my job. And they paid me a fortune. So I flew for a day and a half to Cuba. I changed all the point spreads, and I came back, go to school to Brooklyn Tech. So I was one hand playing genius at Brooklyn Tech, and the other hand well connected with all the guys. And when I went to California, California wasn't an open market. It was closed. So I was to open up the market in major construction. So I left.
When you say open up the market, you mean the gambling market?
Well, at that point in time, it had not occurred, dope hadn't occurred yet. The major market was taking bets. Taking bets was so vigorous. So I had 2,000 people on the job. And on Friday night, they like to go out and drink. But we used to pay them in an envelope on Thursday. So they had no money. So they say, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $20 to go out drinking. I'll see you Friday, and you'll give me $5 out of your paycheck. So I have 1,000 people giving me $5 each.
Why were they giving you $5 each to bet on stuff? I don't understand. I'm confused.
They wanted to go drink.
Okay.
They had no money.
Okay.
So they had money on Thursday, but they couldn't go on Friday because the wives never got a paycheck on Friday.
Okay.
So I did this with the group. I said, I'll give you $20 on Thursday. You can go out and drink with the boys. Friday, when you get your paycheck, I take 25 out. So most of these guys would tell their wives they earn $25. They got to go out every Thursday. I had this in construction. I had 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people paying me $5.
Now, wait a second. There were people above you on that project, or were you doing that on the down low and just putting that in your pocket and nobody knew about that? Or was that part of the gig with the mobsters?
I did it with the mobsters. The mobsters were going to build Las Vegas. Remember, Brian, Vegas didn't exist at this point in time. So I take the money to, I can't remember the guy's name, and deliver bags full of money every month to this guy. I can't remember his name. That's unfortunate. So I was connected from two ways. One, in Tishman, I was building the big things. And two, I was well connected with the mob. I knew everybody. But at a point in time, dope took over the industry. And the old mob guys one had nothing to do with dope. So my thing was gambling and prostitution. And when that turned bad, prostitution and gambling went away. Then 47 came fast. And I don't know what the hell to do.
Wow. So wait a second. So the entire time you were working for Tishman, you were doing this stuff with the mob? Or when did that?
No, right away.
Wow.
As soon as I took the job, and I knew I was supposed to, that's why I was there. And Mom used to get a kick. There was always an envelope in the thing with money in it for me every week.
So did your dad and mom, was your dad connected to any of these guys? What did they know you were working with these guys? How did they feel about that?
My father was a bad crook.
He was a what?
A bad crook.
A bad crook. What does that mean?
My father used to collect money for the Nicepithias, which was an organization. But he was stealing the money we found. And then I would get calls and say, you got to take care of your father, we're going to kill him because he owes us money. So I basically funded my father through the mob, and he never knew I did it. But I didn't want anything to do with him because he was something that I left behind. Same with my mother. So I very rarely knew my parents after I was 13. Was out on my own. The only one in the family I had any connection with was Uncle Jack. So he's the only one I had any connection with.
I remember.
So I
Well, I'm sorry. I want to stop you for a second. What did you say? The Knights of Pythias?
Knights of Pythias was an organization.
An organization called the Knights of Pythias. What that you're just like, yeah, it's just an organization called Knights of Pythias. What the hell is that? It's like a men's organization. What are we talking about?
Yes, men. You heard of the Elks?
Is this like Freemasons?
Yeah, Freemasons. It was Freemasons was Catholic. Knights of Pythias was Jewish. Same group. They didn't allow non-Jews into the Masons.
Yeah.
Non-Jews went into the Knights of Pythias. It still exists. Still a big organization. My father was the guy who collected money for the Knights of Pythias. He was in trouble all the time.
Yeah.
So I really didn't have any time for my father. My mother was Hakmi already. Never I heard her, so I saw as little as her. And I didn't want to stay. Now, I knew Shelley Avalon, who was well connected with the mob. Jay Rosen, who went to prison because he was stealing the money. So the guys from the neighborhood, except Cuz wasn't. He was like the odd man out. So I had two lives, my life and then who I became. As of right now, I think there's only two people alive from the original eight guys. The original eight guys. Original eight guys that none of them went to college, except Jay became a doctor. They all were in their own way part of the mob. Shelley Avalon was a mob guy. Normie Levitt was the muscle. So all my friends from the neighborhood were the mob guys.
And I mean, my mind's flashing to so many things because you said you got flown to Cuba when you were young. And like, I immediately think of JFK and the mob in Cuba. Are we talking about the same people potentially?
Yeah, same people.
Wow.
Same people, the same people. Jason, the mob's been around. Casa Nostra. Didn't have anything to do with dope. It was prostitution and gambling. It was when the new guys came in, when John Gotti came in, and those people got involved in dope, that the older guys got out. They didn't want it. A lot of them died, but we didn't want it. That wasn't what we did. So the mob changed. When dope came in, fentanyl, now it's all gigantic. Originally, it was prostitution and gambling.
Lesser of the evils. Wow.
I had, as successful as I was being connected, that's how successful I became in Tishman because I was able to work with the unions. I had the unions behind me. And that's what made me successful is that every time there was a problem anywhere in the country, I ran to the problem to solve it. So that was my job with Tishman till I was 47. I was all over the world solving problems.
And nobody at Tishman knew that you were doing this thing with the workers and funneling money to the mob?
No, they didn't know.
Yeah.
They didn't know.
And you worked your way all the way up at Tishman.
Yeah, I was vice president. Yeah.
And so before we talk about that, how long after you got to, well, first of all, before we talk about going to the West, I feel like we have to talk about Mom a little bit more. You said you met her in college when you first got there. And she came from, didn't she come from the same neighborhood or similar neighborhood or no?
Bensonhurst.
Bensonhurst.
I was living in Flatbush. She came from Bensonhurst. She lived in a house. No, she was straight as arrows. I don't know if she knew my history. There was no reason to discuss my history because by the time I was 47, I was ready to move on and she was sick. So I don't think she knew my history.
At any point, though, did she become aware that you had stuff, that you were doing stuff with the mob and there was envelopes of money or whatever? She just didn't, or she just didn't.
She knew I had a Cadillac and a Jaguar, and she couldn't figure out how I got all that stuff.
Yeah, she didn't want to know, I bet. She didn't want to know.
No, we lived very calmly in the valley. You know, that's what most of the people up in the mob, they didn't show it. They weren't like John Gotti. He was the first one to beat everybody. Most of us were nice people, had a nice little house, went home every night.
In the suburbs, like Goodfellas.
No.
Yeah, wow. Wow. So, all right. So,
my problem is I forgot the names. This just comes with dementia care. I forgot the names of some of the people I was with.
Yeah. I can't remember names, and even now, so I know what you mean.
So I don't remember their names.
That's all right.
Now and then I read a book and I remember it.
I see. Now, all right. So in your college years, how did you, I mean, I imagine there were different directions you could go in school, like different directions engineering degree might take you. How did you end up going in the kind of direction that you went in and end up at Tishman?
All right. I had to find a job. Construction industry was where all the money was at that point. This was before Las Vegas. So I wanted to go into construction. That meant I had to take civil engineering. So in Brooklyn Tech, I took civil engineering, and I went to college and became a civil engineer. So the idea was to become a civil engineer because that's where all the money was, and that's where all the rackets were. 35% of every dollar now goes to the mob. 35%.
Now you mean presently or?
Presently. 35% of every dollar is payoffs. That's what I want to do. And I wanted to do it on the West Coast because it was taken in Chicago, it was taken in New York, and the West Coast was a new area. Las Vegas was a new area. So I wanted to go to the West Coast, and I wanted to go up the line in construction because of the payoffs. So the only reason I chose construction was the payoffs. And it was the most money I could make. This is $1 million contracts.
Yeah.
So I chose that, and I chose construction. I enjoyed construction. I enjoyed what I was doing, and the fact that I was a vice president. I was 29 years old. I was the first vice president over under 50. I was 29 when they made me a vice president. So I was very, very well associated.
So were the mob guys like from the beginning when you started going to Brooklyn Tech, were they like, oh yeah, good,
Yeah.
hi, you get into construction, that's great for us. Were they like with you the whole time like that?
It was part of a plan.
Yeah.
All the way. Part of a plan. Keep doing it. Do whatever you want. Keep doing it. We'll give you what you want. You want women, you want anything you want, just say it. I was a genius. I could set the point spreads.
Right.
I don't know why.
And that was just like some savant math skills that you had or whatever, or
I have no clue. It was feeling the betting. If there was too much money one way, you want to give points the other place. Remember, we make money on people betting, not on winning and losing. So and I had to keep track of where and what country, in what city, the point spreads were different.
So it's not math. It's instinct. It's you just like vibing it out and feeling where the money is and saying, put it here, put it there.
Okay, listen, the Jets, go to New York, get 2 points for the Jets. It wasn't who was winning. It was as long as the same amount of money both ways. You didn't have to win. You just had to have the same amount of money both ways. If you had where there was a 5-point spread and they lost both ways, it was madness. But it was knowing how it went. I just had a mathematical mind, and I was able to do that.
All right, so you decide to go to civil engineering because that's where the money is and that's where the rackets are, and you got the backing of your mob guys.
That's construction.
So you do well in school. You know how to do this stuff. You told some stories about like the things you had with your teachers and some shenanigans that you played in college. How were your college years like? Did you do okay? I mean, you graduated, right?
Yeah, I did one thing one year. Is getting an A was easy for me. Getting exactly C's for 1 year was hard. I did 1 year to get nothing but C's to prove I could do it.
Now,
so that.
Now wait, you got to give me the logic behind that, Dad. Because why wouldn't you just wanted to? Because you didn't care about whether or not it was an A or a C. It didn't matter, wouldn't it?
No, I was nowhere I was doing. It didn't matter what grades I had. The fact that I was going to be an engineer, the fact that I was going to work at that point in time, there are only 6 companies like this around. The original 6 companies, none of them left now. So I will go to one of those 6 companies. But I began to have fun. Began to do crazy. I'm going to get C's. It's easy to get an A. Only getting a C, you have to answer 70% of the questions, and you had to get them right. So I would do shit like that. It's funny, if you're asking me, while I was seeing your mother in school, she was the only woman I saw. Which was unusual for later on in my life.
Yeah. And you said, prostitution and gambling was the thing.
Yeah.
Was it the kind of thing where you had a wife and then you had the other things too?
Remember, I didn't meet your mother until I got to college. When I was 13 to 18, while I was getting a blowjob, I was setting the point spreads.
I see. Gotcha.
And I'm the kid everybody loved. First off, I was Jewish. Who's the Jew in the... But I had that mind of being able to get the point spreads. Now, the point spreads, if you're in New York, the Jets are getting points. And if you're out of the country and another place, they're getting points. You just had to sit the same amount of guys for and against. But you got Vig.
You were able to see the game in a way that other people weren't.
The one who lost in a betting pays Vig, 10% Vig. The winner gets 100, the loser pays 110. You just had to there were 110, 100 guys. You didn't get a one.
Yeah.
You didn't get a one.
See, people don't know that part of the game. That's why you had their backing. And so, okay, so you go to college and you don't care so much about the grades because you're kind of like whatever, a made guy, and you've got a plan. Your plan is to get into construction and become a civil engineer so you can work with these guys. You said help develop Las Vegas or whatever. So when in college do you end up like does the mob have anything to do with you being at Tishman, or no, that's just you getting that job?
That's me getting that job. They just wanted me on construction for the loans. They knew that guys, though in those days, got paid cash. Every Friday, you'd line up and they gave you cash. They were always borrowing money. They wanted to borrow. You gave them 20 and you took 25. That wasn't a lot of money. They got to go out and drink their heart out.
I know, but it all added up for you. It was just you had numbers, that $5 at a time.
2,000 guys, that's $10,000 a job. A week. That's 40,000 a month.
And how much do you have to kick back to them, and how much do you get to keep?
I kick back to them 7%.
Only 7%?
Yeah.
Oh, see? So you were making that on the side, and Tishman doesn't know you're doing that?
No. Tishman never knew I was doing it. Tishman was a straight company.
All right, so you get into Tishman Construction, huge construction company. You're a young guy out of college. You said you worked like for the city though for a time. Was that during school or just out of school before you got the gig?
1 year.
1 year.
I had to learn the system. You can't learn a system if you're going into the business. So I took a job with the city of Los Angeles, and I understand how the system worked.
Mm.
And then I left to go with Tishman.
I see. And you start out at Tishman at the bottom, I imagine, at the bottom of the left.
$619 a month. No, for Tishman, I told John Tishman I wanted $60,000 a year, and never had to raise my salary. I think they all knew it because I never bothered them. I went and took care of all the problems. When there was a problem on a job site, I was able to go to the job site, see the boys in Chicago, Detroit, New York, Las Vegas, Hong Kong, wherever it was, and get the problem solved.
Now, when you say that, is that because of the mob connections or just because you had some insights about how to make the job better?
Both. It was a good job, and they all liked me. I mean, I would go wherever the job was and solve the problem. That was my job, solving problems.
You were the fixer.
Yeah, I was the fixer. It's before computers.
So you suspicion that people at Tishman had some idea that you were connected to these people, or no?
Never.
They just know that you were solving problems and they weren't asking how.
There were people at Tishman who were on the take, but they didn't know I was on the take also.
I see.
There were other people at Tishman that were being paid by others.
Uh-huh.
And there were things that you had. What's this? No, people are not going to be knocking on my door. No one cares about me anymore.
No, I'm not.
All I can still is pagans.
Yeah. No, I'm just, again, I didn't realize that you had as much connection to organized crime as you clearly did, or that that it played such a role in what you did.
But I wasn't where organized crime was. I was on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. Organized crime was Chicago. There was no organized crime before I got involved.
I see. You were just met them when you were young and worked with them, and then you just had this.
Smith. I just remember the guy's name.
Who?
Barney Smith was the guy I paid off at the end of each month.
Say that name again. I didn't hear it good. Say it again.
Barney, Forney Smith.
Barney Smith.
Smith.
He was your connection, huh? He was your handler.
He was a guy. I don't know if he liked me or not, but he take me up in a plane and say, if these numbers are right, I'm throwing you out of the plane. Just say to me all the time.
Well, all right. Well, so I also remember this story about how you worked your way up at Tishman by planning what you were going to do. If you ever saw the guy come in and pretend like you didn't know who he was, is that a real story? Is that a made up story? Do you know which one I'm
No,
talking about?
no. Tell me which story it was.
I have a story that you used to tell that I remember where you said you used to do a lot of like visualization, like you used to teach that, in
Oh,
fact, like planning stuff, and that you came up with this thing that if you ever came into your office and the big boss was there, you would ask him to leave and pretend like you didn't know who he was, and that you actually did that and it became a thing. Is that real or is that made up?
that's real. That's real. I believed in visualization. I spend my life in a car and visualizing what would happen, what I'd say, what he'd say, what I'd say. So I had lived these things long before I had an opportunity to take advantage of it. So when these things happened, I lived it already. So I knew what to say, how to say it, and I trained myself that way. So I was big on visualization by practicing what I was going to say and what I was going to do.
And you did this with John Tishman? Is that the story? Tell the story.
Abe Elskin, John Tishman. I can't remember the specifics. There were stories that I liked better. Let me give you an example of a mistake.
Okay.
So I was building a big office building, 9200 Sunset Boulevard, and it was Charles Luckman, who was a pain in the ass architect. No one wanted to work with him. This was his building. It was 40 stories, and he wanted to put 2 floors on top of it. And no one wanted. I wanted. Because the more you can work with the nutcakes, the better you are. I had to deal with him. He couldn't come on the job site. If there was anything I did that he didn't like at the end, he didn't have to pay for it. So I go up to the building, job's done. Everybody wants to know, am I crazy? This guy doesn't have to pay $1.5 million. I walk in, he opens up the window and he says, where are my screens? You're letting the bugs in my place. And I turned around and said, no, I don't know what you think, but we're up 45 floors. Bugs don't fly this high. And he said to me, I don't know if that's true, but I'll pay the bill. And that was a famous story. And I thought of it at the time. I was very quick on my feet. And there were many, many stories like that.
Was it true? I mean, it sounds true, like the bugs don't go that high. Do you even know if it was true or not?
Years later, when I was teaching at the University of Colorado, one of my friends, I made a deal. You can never check it on me. He looked it up. Bugs do fly that high.
See? That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of times you were just able to say something in the right way at the right moment.
Yeah, I was on my feet. I was different. Everybody else in my level was 55 and 60 years old. I was 29. So I was the guy to handle the problems. And I had the ability, whatever the problem was, construction-wise, to know how to solve it. And that was really my claim to fame in Tishman. Could I have stayed with Tishman? Is the one question I always ask myself. Someone had to be president. Wasn't what I wanted. But I often
first, let me share one thing. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but I have, when you talk about like being on your feet and being different, I have this very specific memory that always stayed with me where I believe it was like mom's birthday or like the day before mom's birthday, and you needed to get her a gift. And you took me with you to the mall, to the Topanga Plaza. And we got to the mall and we got out of the car and we were start to walk in, and you felt your pockets and you said, oh crap, I forgot my wallet. And I was like, oh, okay. And I started walking back to the car to get back in, figuring that we had to go home to get your wallet. And you're like, no, that's okay. And I was like, Dad, how are you going to get something if you don't have your wallet? And he was like, don't worry, trust me. And I watched you walk in. I watched you pick out a purse for her. And I watched you go up to the counter, and then there was some girl working there, and it came time to pay. And you said, I don't have my wallet with me, but I have an account here. Can you look it up? And she's like, oh no, I can't do that. And you were like, okay, can you get your manager? And you brought the manager over. and you managed to get them to do something that they totally were not allowed to do, that they could probably have gotten fired for. And I watched it all happen, and I was like, wow. And it was legit. Like you did have an account there and whatever, but you got them to bend the rules for you. And
I did that 1,000 times in my life. I did that in every job I was ever on, whatever problems I had, I was able to come up with an answer. I don't know why. I don't know why I would think fast and have answers. We were doing the Sears Tower in New York, and we had columns that when we came to do it, we couldn't get in the building. It was too high. I said, tilt it and twist it and carry it through. And I said, hey, yeah, that works. And I had tons of things like that I solved during my life. That's what I did. I solved problems.
And you say you don't know where that comes from. You just had that ability.
Yeah, I know where it comes from.
Where do you think it comes from? It's like there's a certain audacity to that. Like there's a certain I don't give a fuck about nothing in a way that is underlying your ability to bullshit like that in the moment.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather. Why? Your grandfather was like that?
My grandfather was like that. My grandfather worked for Tishman Construction. It was the first job I had as a 10 or 11-year-old, and I watched him operate. And I realized that was what I wanted, a guy who could think on his feet. So my grandfather was a con artist like that. My father was a crook. My grandfather was a con artist. He knew boys. So I knew.
Funny you say that. I remember Ira did a family lineage tree or whatever, and he discovered our family, we're all con artists and, like you said, criminals, right? That's our heritage in a sense, right?
The members of our family were like our Uncle Jack, and no one else I could think of. My grandfather, Uncle Jack. I think that you're all intelligent. I think that you and Brian and Missy are intelligent.
I'm not suggesting that makes us criminals or crooks. I'm just saying our history, our family history.
Our family history, there's a lot of sides.
Well, you mentioned Uncle Jack. I remember Uncle Jack as a kid because, like you said, he was one of the only relatives we kind of spent some time with. And he had the big trailer at one point, and he had the weird thing he did with the Lysol that he sprayed everywhere. So what was Jack's deal? Was he mobbed up too?
Yeah. Jack coming with was from the neighborhood, and Jack was mobbed up in printing. So he was mobbed up. He did very well. We got along great. I mean, keep on flying out. I'm getting divorced. Here's all my money. When I finish with this divorce, give it back to me. So I had that thing going with Jack. He was very much like me. I was very much like him. So I don't know, that didn't come from my father. That came from my mother. So in the family between my grandfather and Uncle Jack, I was what I was. I knew what I wanted, and I knew by the time I was 10, 11 years old.
And what you wanted was?
Money.
Yeah. I remember the shirt in the 80s, he who dies with the most toys wins.
That's right. That was me. Money. After I married Nancy, it was all gone.
Well, wait, we're not there yet. So, all right. So you're working at Tishman for how many years? A lot of years, right?
20
years at Tishman. And how soon into that do you work your way up as high as vice president? You said, you started at the bottom for 60 grand, but you were not making 60 grand when you were vice president.
$613 a month was my salary for the state highway department. I was 22, 23 when I went to work for Tishman. I was 26 before I knew I had something. And I was 29 when I was vice president.
And how do you think you managed to get to vice president at such a young age? You said it was a bit unprecedented. What was it? Just that you were so effective in your job?
Yeah, I was effective in my job. And I never knew what Abe Bulsky, who was my boss, knew of me when he made me a vice president.
Mm.
He said, you need it. You got to be able to sign contracts. So he saw something in me. I knew I was good, but up until I was 29, I never got to prove it, really prove it with big dollars. So it was, when I was 29, I was making big money. I was spending big money.
Now, wait a second. Now, it was before you became vice president that Tishman Construction worked on the World Trade Center?
Yeah. Yeah.
How soon after you were there did that, because I remember you being on CNN on 9/11 or whatever, being interviewed.
I was 26.
You were 26. And just for the record here, what were you doing? How were you at all involved in the building of the World Trade Center?
If there was a problem, I could solve it.
Even on the World Trade Center project?
There was before computers. Nothing fit. Nothing was the way it's supposed to be. You had to figure a way around it.
Right.
My way around it.
So I guess I bring that up only because it was a very significant moment for me, and it was strange that you did have some connection to it. And I remember you being interviewed about that. So I guess I'm curious for you. I don't know how much of what you were doing. I mean, you just said it was really just about you wanting to gain wealth and status to kind of get out of your childhood in Brooklyn, where your parents, you didn't see them as smart or successful, and you wanted to see the whole world. You wanted to be able to travel, and you did. You did do that. You did travel all over.
I was going to die at 50.
Right.
I do it all before I was 50. And, I did it all.
Yeah.
Did everything there was before I was 50.
All right. So wait a second. So then, okay, you say you have this heart attack at 47, but prior to that, are you feeling fulfilled and happy? At some point, you have millions of dollars.
Am I happy? No. I had the money. I had the power, but I didn't have the prestige.
What does that mean? What is prestige?
It's when everybody who you see, you're like Brown.
Oh, you wanted to be known and famous or something.
I wanted to be famous. I wanted everybody to know who I was. I wanted to be somebody in the real world. That came with my basic teaching.
Mm.
But
wait, you didn't start teaching until after you left Tishman.
Left Tishman, right.
And you left Tishman after the heart attack. That's the deal, huh?
It's talking about how did I leave?
Yeah, okay.
I took the big jobs after I had my heart attack, but my heart wasn't in it. Mm. I didn't want that. That's why the teaching at the University of Colorado was so important. I still have all my students who write me to say they wouldn't have been where they were without me. So I got my prestige
through being a teacher, right? Because that makes sense, because you found your friend's name who had basically like written papers about projects you had worked on or whatever, or like the thing that you were doing, the bullshitting that you were doing became a whole area of study, right? Design build, right? Isn't that what it was called?
That was it.
Design build. Now, wait a second. You just said that you had the money, you weren't fulfilled, and you have this heart attack. So I guess I'm more curious to hear about what happened when you had your heart attack. Like,
nothing. I woke up.
Do you attribute the heart attack to just like you treating yourself shitty and not eating well? Do you think it was a divine intervention? Like, how do you?
Everybody in the family died at 50. Jack died. and Celia died, my mother died, everybody died.
Mm.
Why should I live? I thought there was congenital heart defect, and I wasn't about to check it. I didn't want to know if I had it or didn't have it.
You never went to check it or anything, yeah.
I was just going to do everything I could. I was going to live to 50. And that was it. And when I woke up, I just didn't know what to do because it was then I stayed for I became a different person. When I met Nancy, I became a different person.
Mm. Now, how do you think, I don't know, maybe this is a touchy subject, but I'm your son, so I feel like I have to ask.
Yes.
How did that change in you affect your relationship to mom?
Okay.
Like your relationship to mom was all predicated on this other self you had, and she was part of that plan for you, the way that she was as a person.
Wait a second. Mom was my wife. At that point in life, Mom had let herself go. She was lost. She was unhappy. She was unhappy with her parents and so on and so forth. Nancy was my mistress. I saw Nancy 10 years before she knew I wasn't married. I was married. I was able to con Nancy for 10 years. She didn't know I was married. So I had this dual life of Mom was my wife with you and the kids, and Nancy was the person I went around the world with.
Hmm.
I knew
and that was a pattern that you had. Duplicitous lives was something you've been doing your whole life.
More than one. I became attached to Nancy because she did something that I thought was great. I was in Paris at the Plaza Athénée, which was a fancy, fancy hotel. I was there half a day and in walked Nancy. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I ain't leaving you alone in Paris." And that's when I wanted Nancy. So that was what started my relationship with Nancy. I didn't see Nancy for 2 years when Mom's cancer came. I figured I owed her that much, and I didn't fool her out for those 2 years. But I always knew I wanted Nancy. And when I got a hold of her and seen her for 2 years, she told me she was getting married, and they had just bought a house. And said, "I know another story of how I won her back."
So, wow. I also have this memory of you very briefly after leaving Tishman, like you were talking with the Swedish guys, or you worked with some Swedish company for a minute there.
Yes.
Was that you just kind of transitioning out of being in construction?
I realized that they weren't going to make me President Tishman because he had 3 kids. And I wanted to be president of my own boss. So I went to work for a Swedish company because Sweden was the large builder in the world. And you can't go from Tishman, the largest builder in the United States, the largest builder in the world. And I realized I didn't have it anymore. That goal to be successful was not satisfied at the Swedish company. So I quit. So no one understood. And then I don't remember really what I did.
Oh, I kind of have some memories. You got into collecting comic character watches.
Yeah.
You amassed the largest collection of comic character watches and then published a definitive desktop book on the subject, if I recall.
Yeah, I have a part of me that brought out that right now I'm collecting books, regular watches. I ended up taking some of that was part of me into collections. I'm very upset that of all the books, there are 2 missing, and it's supposed to be in the mail, and they didn't arrive. So I'm very upset.
Well, all right. So this heart attack happens.
Yes.
And you expected yourself to be done at that point, but then you find yourself not done. And the things that you had made your goals previously have been achieved and they're no longer feeding you or satisfying in any way, or you no longer even have you don't have any purpose or goals in the same way.
Nothing. I have no goals, no purpose.
But you've got a wife and kids. I kind of remember, it's interesting to hear you talk about it now that I'm 52 and I have kids.
Yeah.
And it's, I can kind of see it. You had the Jaguar. I remember you like buying me a moped at 15 and pissing mom off. You weren't supposed to, and you did it anyways.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with myself.
I can see all the things. It explains a lot of behaviors that I remember from you, because as a person,
the only person that put me back to where I had some meaning was Nancy. Her going for the PhD became important.
Well, we should talk about your time teaching too, because it seemed like that was a significant, like you said, you wanted some accolades. You wanted to feel like you were known for something. And then you did find that. You found like somebody in Colorado who was teaching college kids about how to do design build. Maybe you say something about that period of time, your Colorado years.
Design build was something new. It was really construction management. It was easy to explain as design build. It was the advent of computers coming. I was able to take 9, 10 years before computers replaced me by teaching them to do what I did. And that was very satisfying to me, because almost all my students, 50% of them, which were women, have stayed in the thing, and I still stay in contact with them. So I loved teaching, but I got tired of it.
I mean, I remember I have this idea in my head about design build, or maybe it's not design build, maybe it's what you were doing before it became design build. But I kind of remember you talking about how you'd have these multi-million-dollar projects and you could never get them to come in done under budget or in time. But because you like owned a piece of the concrete company and owned a piece of the air conditioner company, or you had some connections to the companies, if you didn't own pieces of them, when it came time to do a big project, you could kind of make things happen and save millions of dollars because of that. Is that my sense of, or at least design build is about knowing enough about all these areas to kind of manage a whole big project. Is that what it is?
When I was first given my first big project, it was behind budget. So I called everybody in and I said, everybody on this job has to redo their contract and cut 6.5% out. And if you do that, you'll never want for work again. And they all revoked the contract. Job came in on budget. And that was the start of my moving in my career, that I was the guy that get the job done.
I remember you saying to me, Jay, if I go in and I consult on somebody's project and I save them $200 million, how much is that worth to them, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, the scale of that. What are some of the biggest projects that you worked on? I remember you worked on Epcot Center and Rodeo Drive. Is that right? What are some of the biggest projects you remember working on?
Let's see. Rodeo Drive, Epcot Center, all the Disney Worlds, Sears Tower in Chicago, every major project there was for the 20 years that I was with Tishman. I built 4 out of the 5 historic buildings that are more than 100 floors high. The only one I didn't build, the Empire State Building, I was done where I was around. But the 4 in the United States, I built all 4 of them. And when I say I built all 4 of them, it's only the first one that I had direct charge of, where I'd go out and I had to do it. After that, every time there was a major project, there was a problem. This is for computers. They call me. And you solve the problem? Yeah. Fly me there. So I'd go there. And what always blew everybody's mind, after I got off the plane, I didn't know how to get to the project. I said, someone take me to the project. I don't know how to get there. I get in the car, I go to the project, spend 4 days and leave. How am I supposed to know how to get there? So I can never find my way to a project.
They need you to be able to find a way to the project. They need you to fix the problems once you got there.
Yeah.
I guess it seems to me that this ability that you had, or this natural inclination that you then cultivated to be in the moment and do a little bit of bullshitting, but also a little bit of really smart reasoning and understanding of people and situations and contracts and business in a way. It seems like there was some kind of downside to that, though, for you as a person, in the sense that I also remember you like doing those hotel projects where you would invited family members in, and then whatever happens with those projects and the nature of business and bottom line numbers goes down, and your family members get screwed, and that really destroys whatever relationships that you had and caused great rifts in our family that live to this day.
Uh,
Or were the rifts already there? But I don't know enough about the history to say. In my mind, you kind of did some fucked up shit to people, and there were repercussions of that. But maybe I don't know enough about what it is. And I don't say that as a judgment against you, just as an observation.
there were two people who fit that thing, Uncle Stevie and Cuz. I thought they were business people. They were not business people. So I had to make a decision to support the people I know my whole life, or should I support Cousin Stevie? And I chose to support the people I worked my whole life. The thing missing from my whole life, till I basically came here to Jerusalem, I have no relationships with anybody I work with my whole life, except the guys who were in the mob when I was 13 years old. Those are the only people I can call friends, no one else. So I gave up friendship for those 30, 40 years that I was in business. Only the guys that I was with originally are my friends, no one else. And that's what I had to give up. That was the price I paid.
So in those quality inn hotels or whatever, you had to kind of choose between the project or Stevie and them. I don't know if I understand. You had to, at some point you faced a choice. Who was going to get screwed, and you had to choose them, or you chose them.
Chose them.
Yeah.
Knowingly. It wasn't a hard thing to make. They asked for something that they had to wait.
Yeah.
And I got
They had pissed you off also, so you were like,
it pissed me off.
yeah.
It basically pissed me off. And
Because they didn't let you do your thing. You're like, hey, let me do the thing. I'll take care of it. And they were like, no, you're going to do it our way. And then you said, fuck you, and you screwed them.
Right. That's the way I used to be.
That's what I'm saying. I'm only asking it and bringing it up because it's indicative of, as you said, the person that you were before, or that you felt like.
Jason, don't feel unhappy that you have to bring up things like that. I make no excuses for what I was. I know I did it, and that's it. So you don't feel free to discuss anything you want. Mm-hmm. I do have one objection, that I wasn't able to redo my connection to Brian. I don't know why. I don't know if it's him, but there is no connection to Brian.
Yeah, but you see that, I'm going to tell you that there is a connection. It's just that the connection is such that you guys are estranged. And it is because Brian seems to me to be very much like Stevie in certain ways. And Mom even kind of predicted that. And it's the same reason why I have no real connection to Brian either.
Yeah. That's the only thing that I feel bad about, is lack of connection to Brian. But
I mean, it's a thing in our family. That thing of like grudge holding and people just like being estranged. I mean, I'm
Sometimes,
going to Alex, Jody's daughter's wedding next summer. They invited us because, we invited them to our wedding and they came. And they invited us to their wedding and we're going. And it's the first like family thing I'm going to with my daughters, really. Like there's never been, although we
yeah,
did go to Ira's wedding, but they were so little, they don't remember.
yeah.
And I mean, I guess what do you think it is about our family that these long held grudges and like
Well,
estrangements have persisted?
Stevie's, for instance, they don't talk to Naomi's brother. So they come naturally. Families have things that they become. That's all there is to it. There's grudges from the 1920s. Mozzie's father never spoke to his brother. So until recently, I never thought of it.
I mean, I think of it because it's fractured families. It's
the way families are. They have their own things. I believe that Brian's is part of his relationship with his wife. I believe Brian has never forgiven me for Mom. It is what it is.
It's strange though, because it did seem like you guys not so long ago had a coming back together and then it fell apart again, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah. But I guess that's sometimes the things people in our family, like, they take offense and then just write you off and that's the end of it. And then in a way, there's not really a way to come back together unless you do exactly what they want you to do or something like that. That's why I remember when I first left and I went to college at NYU and I had it in mind, I'm going to have my own relationship to our family. I'm not my father. Whatever my father did is not me. So and I went to, I believe it was Ira's bar mitzvah with my girlfriend. And I just remember that Stevie was such an asshole to me. Like I was like he came in and he just made some shitty comment and like, I don't even remember exactly what it was, but I remember being on the verge of tears and being so upset. And then strangely later in the evening, when everybody was drunk, they were all coming up to me and telling me how much they loved me. And I was so confused. And I remember having a phone conversation with you after I got back and saying, Dad, what the fuck? What's up with our family? And you said, that's why me and your mom left. That there was like this like emotional hijacking and like manipulative kind of thing that was really, I don't know, unhealthy in our family. And that's maybe why you and Mom tried to escape it in a sense, or you tried to escape it. I don't know if Mom's family was the same as yours.
Mom was part of escaping it. She wanted to escape it also.
Mm-hmm. Then you talked about on the other side of the heart attack, things being changed and you being lost. And then Mom got sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Mom passed.
Right.
And I guess that's interesting go ahead.
That's an interesting thing. Tell me how you think Mom passed.
How did Mom pass? Like, what did she die of?
No, what was the actual thing that I did? This is part of the problem that Brian, I think, had. It didn't work. Mom kept on having these things.
Wait a second. Let me say what I know of it, and then you'll fill in these gaps that I might have. Mom had originally breast cancer, and she went through cancer treatments for breast cancer. She did not have her breast removed, though, did she? I don't think she did, but she did do chemo. I remember she lost all of her hair. I remember all of that happening. I remember not really paying a lot of attention at that. I was in much denial, but I remember she got better after that. She went into remission, and she had been in remission for a lot of years, if I'm not mistaken, even 7, which constitutes being technically cured of the cancer if you're in remission for that long. But then she ended up having leukemia. And I do remember the trip to Seattle when she couldn't get up the stairs. And that was the first time I remember her being sick with the leukemia, which she did end up passing. And if I'm not also recall, you spent a lot of your money on trying to get bone marrow transplants for her, if I recall too, right?
Yeah, it's approximately the same, but there were many, many bone transplants up until the last one. When the doctor came to me and said, "This is it. This one didn't work. It's never going to work. And she's going to pass. What do you want to do?" Because we had done 7 bone transplants at various times. She was never in remission. But at the beginning, when they did the bone transplant, it worked a lot better than it did at the end. It came a point in time when she said, "I don't want this anymore. I don't want you and the kids to get up every morning and wonder, is Mom going to be alive tomorrow? I want you to pull a plug." And I said, "We've had a good life. This is not a good life. If you want the plug pulled, I'll pull the plug." And that's what we did. That was a decision that your mother and I did. And that was the end. I suspect that Brian knew. And he's never forgiven me for that.
But if Mom was involved in that decision, why would he blame you?
Jason, wasn't I in charge of everything?
Yeah.
Who's he going to blame?
Yeah. And I mean, the rest of the family would, because I hadn't, that specific fact that you and Mom made a choice to unplug life support. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at some point a decision was made, like, not to continue pursuing more bone marrow transplants. But I do remember, like, all of the family really being angry at you and even kind of trying to pit us against you at times when they first came over. And I really resented it, like, profoundly. And it really pushed me away from all of them that they behaved that way in Mom's death. And I guess in my mind, I always thought that that was because they knew about Nancy. And maybe that's it. But do you think it had also to do with this decision to turn off life support?
No, there wasn't a Nancy at that point in time.
Oh, because you hadn't really, like, gotten back with her or whatever.
Yeah. Why are you nodding your head? No. No, we hadn't back together.
Yeah.
No.
So they were mad at you for that.
They were mad at me because I pulled the plug.
I see.
I was convinced that was what did it. So that was the turning point to where the family said that they wanted you children to move back with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen, though. I mean, I think that there was a very significant moment for me. I remember being in a meeting at the hospital with Mom and everybody and a social worker. And I remember Mom saying very clearly that she didn't want you to be alone after she was gone. And a few other things that I wish I could remember more specifically, but Mom said a few things in that meeting that totally guided me during this period of time after Mom passed and the family had come and they were kind of making comments to us about potentially coming to live with them. I just remember what Mom had said in that meeting. And as I said, I really resented that they would do that. It felt really wrong to me that That's the way
I
they
was
were.
where I was.
Mm. So I guess I'm also curious because I remember that when I was a kid, you had a lot of money and you had Jaguars, and I got a car when I was 16, and there was always money in the drawer for whenever we needed to go out. Um, and then there was this period of time right when I was getting out of school where you didn't have any money. I
Right?
remember you working at the department store selling suits, if I recall. So
Yeah.
that must have been a big thing in a way, since your whole goal in life had been to make a
My
lot of money and be
whole,
wealthy, and then at some point you weren't wealthy or you were in a different situation.
no,
Can you
it
say
was, I
something about
wasn't,
that, and can we talk about that being like an IRS thing or what?
no, it was $100,000, 200,000 each time mom had this thing done. I'd done it 7 times. I was so close to $2 million of what I thought was a lot of money didn't exist anymore. Uh, I didn't have a desire to build money up again. Teaching at University of Colorado paid the bills, but it wasn't a lot of money left over. Uh, and I didn't like the person I was when I was making a lot of money.
Yeah, see what
So
you got to do to make that kind of money.
yeah,
I've
and
learned that in my life, Dad, that like in order to make a lot of money, very often you have to be making certain compromises or being
and
a
I,
certain way in order to make that kind of money. And I
I,
don't make a lot of money for that reason, because I don't think I don't feel like I could ever be that way.
I didn't want to do that. Um, that was where I was. I didn't want to do what I had to do to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Doing the bagels was just something to keep busy.
Well, first of
Uh,
all, we got to go back a little bit maybe to the comic character watches, because you did kind of make that a thing, and you worked the deal with QVC. I remember you built the X-Men watches. I still have them in my attic with the die-cast metal cases. Like, you had a moment there where you were being a little bit entrepreneurial about your comic character watch fetish.
I was going to do. I forgot all about that. Yeah, I was going to do it again with comic character watches. Um, the market wasn't ready for it.
I mean, I remember you had this is a moment where you and I spend some time. From some reason, I went to a fair amount of those watch conventions with you. Like, some of my memories of our time together, like our bonding time together, are going to those watch conventions. And I remember when you were working on the X-Men watches, one, you got a deal with Marvel. Of course, if I recall, the management or the ownership of Marvel changed at some points, which totally fucked up your whole thing. But you did work it. You did come up with this idea to make 5,000 of each watch, and each one had a number, and you were going to sell out of all of them, and you had a whole plan to do a series of 5. You had it all worked out, but then they changed the plan and they just sold it off to QVC, if I recall.
Yes, that's what happened. That's exactly
Yeah.
what happened. You couldn't play with the big dogs and be a small dog. And I realized that had to end. Um, I did a lot of strange things. When I came to Israel and built the first houses,
Wait, so let's get to Israel before you build the houses, because that connects to Colorado. You
yeah,
were working with the students, right? You were coming up with an idea to build what eco houses using shipping containers, right? Is that what I remember?
it was called real housing.
Mhm.
That now became a big thing. I was 10 years ahead of the market, but that was my other thing.
I mean, you had it going for a little while. Now, wait a second. Now, the move to Israel, okay? You always say it's because Nancy wanted to go there. I always wondered if it was also you like having to leave for one reason or another. What's the real story? Tell me the real story about why you moved to
The
Israel.
story is Nancy went to Israel because she wanted to convert. Or to convert, you had to live in Israel. She wanted to live in Israel. Nancy believed in Judaism. She had found the religion and wanted to live in Israel. I had to make a decision. Was I going to take the company to Israel, Real Housing, and try and make it go over here? So I didn't have to leave the United States. I owed the government $5 million. I still owe the government $5 million.
I have to say something. I have to stop you for 1 second because it really goes to something that I think about you when it comes to money, and something that like I don't have. It's something that makes me feel it makes me different than you, I think. But I remember having a conversation with you when I was young, and there had been a phone call maybe from somebody, an IRS person, and I remember asking you, Dad, don't you worry if you owe people money? And you said, Jason, listen, if you owe somebody, $5,000, $50,000 and you don't have that money, you've got a real problem, If you owe someone $50 million, they have a problem.
Right.
And that was the mentality. Like, you seem to be okay. Like, you weren't emotionally affected by money and debt in the
No.
same way that I feel like I am. Like, you seem to have like a certain remove from the emotional realities of that or something.
Doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Never did. Because I always knew that, I always thought I could figure out a way to pay the debt if I had to pay the debt. We're in an interesting place now. Nancy's contracts with China, Dublin, France, paying a fortune. I gotta stop paying taxes again.
Seems to me that you have always kind of taken a moment, like you said earlier in this conversation, when you took the job of like learning how the system works.
Yeah.
And then playing the system on its own terms, in a way with a certain cold bloodedness that a lot of people like me don't have or whatever, just because that's the system and you were very pragmatic about it.
Not anymore. I have listen, I've done most of what I wanted to do. I'm basically a lazy person. I want to be lazy now. I read my books.
Yeah.
Decided to turn it into lazy.
I see. Well, do you have regrets? If you could go back and change any of it, would you?
No.
No.
I've lived my life the way I wanted to live it. I was fortunate enough to live it. I'm living it again because Nancy's living it. And I'm enjoying what she's doing. And I'm enjoying the accolades she has. And it's enough for me now to live through Nancy. I don't have any more mountain to climb.
I mean, you blew so past the 50 mark. What's your age right now? 80, 82. You blew way past it. So Dad, does that mean that you've been lost for the last 30 years?
If you define lost as having a goal, yes. I've had no goals for the last 30 years, but to just live.
I mean, that's a goal.
That's the goal.
And that's not lost. That's not lost.
So look, Nancy just got back from China. You know that. I'm proud of her. She's accomplished what can't be accomplished. And the fact that part of something I have to do with her and her accomplishments are enough for me. It doesn't have to be me. I get it from her.
See, but there you go, Dad. That's the big difference, okay? Because it was all about you. And now you're saying it doesn't have to be about me. That's a certain
Yeah.
a selflessness that you have gained over the years.
Listen, we just had a large discussion, but I got the will now, is what am I going to do with the money that's left?
You know what? I don't even really, I don't want to hear that discussion. I don't know. That's a strange discussion to have, honestly, because,
Why?
money for me is I have a very estranged relationship to money. I have an issue with money. I think I've done things in my life unconsciously to almost sabotage myself so that I didn't
You
make more
lived it.
money.
You lived
And
it.
I think that's because of me witnessing how much that being a goal for you had an impact on all the other things about life too, and then how afterwards it didn't fulfill you.
Money was never, well, power was what I was interested in. Money, whatever you want to call it,
But they go together, don't they?
they go together. I'm in a different place. I'm a different person now. I'm the person that should have stayed in New York and been happy. I didn't have to leave because the rest of it was only there because it was a thing they were tame. It never made me happy. That's the part thing I realized. Making all that money never made me happy. And that's the thing that was tough to live with.
Okay, so then what does make you happy if money doesn't make you happy?
Nancy.
Your love of with her and seeing her thrive. I get it.
That's it. I can kick it. When she starts with supposed to be 7 people and it's now 17,000. When she's done what I did in my life. It hasn't been done before. And that's nice to see.
Well, Papa, I came into doing this with you today like I would do any of my podcasts. And this is the moment where I would close it because we just came full circle back to Brooklyn. So I also have a thing I got to get to in a little bit. So I think we need to call it right here for now. And, we can be in touch about what we do with this, what you want to do with this. If you're interested in sharing it or having it out there, or if we want to do more, like we can definitely do more of this if you want.
Well, I want to do more.
Okay.
And I'm getting a kick of being able to explain to you. Missy doesn't want any part of it. Brian doesn't part of it. So it's all on you. I don't know what you want to do with it, but it's important that I get to discuss it with somebody.
I'm really glad to be having this time with you, and we'll definitely do some more. And let me just think about it, and I'll get to you, and we'll decide what we want to do with it, if anything. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Love you. I love you, Papa.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. And there you have it. I hope that was interesting for you. You're still listening here at the end, or maybe you skipped ahead. I don't know. So maybe it held your interest all the way through. I don't know. It's impossible for me to have any perspective on this one, y'all. I gotta say, I had no idea of some of those things. I had no idea how mobbed up my dad was. Like my whole childhood, he was like in bed with the mob. I didn't know that. And honestly, some of that stuff about my mom and some of those things about our family, like, it's a lot of stuff. And I will say also that over the years, like my dad always was a storyteller. Like my whole childhood, my dad told stories. And it was kind of an ongoing joke that the stories were often embellished. And sometimes it seemed like he embellished and told these stories over so many years. At some point, he didn't even really remember what the original story was. He only remembered the embellished versions. However, when I think back on this, I'd say at least 75-80% is totally verifiable. And really, some of the details are less important than kind of the overarching themes to me. You know, when I was growing up, my dad was that person that he was describing, that person who thought he was going to only live to 50, and his goal was to like amass as much money and power as he could. And to hear my dad talk about how maybe he should have never left Brooklyn, I just think that was very significant for me. Also, at the end, when he talked about how it doesn't need to be about him, and he's been able to like take joy through Nancy, that selfless act of caring for another person and prioritizing that over material gains, you know. I'm still kind of processing and thinking a lot about some of the stuff he said in terms of what his goals were in life, you know. And then if your goal isn't to just like have a lot of money and have power, then what becomes the goals in life? You know, what are the other sorts of goals that we would have? And anybody listening to this show knows that's what I've been talking about, especially over the last couple of years. That's why I've been talking about higher powers and all of that jazz. Because the material wealth and status is just such a hollow pursuit. And I saw that in my dad, and I think I've tried to have a life that was about something else. So there's a lot in here. And really, I have no idea whether any of my family members listen to the show. I really don't think they do. I don't think my dad listens to the show regularly. I'm not sure if he had it in mind when he said to me on the phone a few weeks back that he wanted to reflect on his life. If he thought, oh, maybe Jay will do a podcast with me. I don't think he had that in mind because I really don't think he's really familiar with the show. Although I could be wrong about that. As far as I know, though, none of my family listen to this. Maybe they will this one, I don't know. But like I said in the intro, it felt significant for me to do it, and posting it is part of the process of that. And I do hope, as I said, that there was something in it for you. And I really appreciate anyone who cares enough to still be listening. So please hang in there with everything. And at the very least, what do you say we be kind? Let's be kind to ourselves. Let's be kind to others. And I will talk to you again soon. Please take care. Cheers.